Welcome to our episode of Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down. Sponsored by Bible Interact and hosted by Dr. George Sparks. Now let's explore the field of archaeology in today's episode.
Well, welcome people. My name is Dr. George Sparks and my guest host is Dr. David Graves from Aberdeen University. That's where he received his PhD. And this is Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down, sponsored by Bible Interact. Today's program, we're going to be talking about, I'm going to say the dynamic duo, husband and wife team archaeologists that are out there making history, finding really unusual items during the excavations. And Dr. Graves today is going to use a PowerPoint presentation and describe and tell us about really a lady that is fairly popular. Everybody's going to, you're going to be surprised who this lady is and what she did in the field of archaeology with her husband. And I'm not going to give anything away. I'm not going to be that spoiler alert. So David, go ahead and run with it, if you will.
All right. So we thought that what we would do for the next few weeks is do a little bit of a mini series. We've entitled it Some Major Discoveries Digging Together by Legendary Archaeology Couples. They might be husband and wife. We might have a couple of surprises with a father-daughter team. So today what I want to talk about are two people that you might have heard of one, you may not have heard of the other. I found this really, really intriguing. We're going to talk about Agatha Christie and Max Mallowan, the Queen of Mystery and Archaeology. Now,
so this lady that, I'm sorry to interrupt you, the lady that I was telling people about to pay attention to because she's well known, but few know that she's an archaeologist. And her name is?
Yeah, Agatha Christie.
Agatha Christie, the writer.
So, now,
great picture. Wow.
Yeah, and that's her husband, Max Mallowan there. And Agatha's there. This is in their later years.
So her name could have been Agatha Mallowan?
Yes, but she kept her first husband's name Christie, so that's kind of interesting. The material that I'm going to be talking about is found in my book on the history of biblical archaeology. Now, this book came out of a course I was teaching at Oxford entitled The History of British Biblical Archaeology, where I just looked at British archaeologists. And Agatha Christie and Max Mallowan were a couple that I dealt with. But my book here has, I think, somewhere around 100 different archaeologists that I deal with. It's an interesting survey, but it comes out of this material that I had taught at Oxford on it. Here are a couple of the photographs that I've colorized of Agatha. And here she is with her husband, Max, in their elder years. Now, we all know Agatha Christie probably from her novels that she wrote. And here's a few of them. The novels that were inspired by her travels was Murder on the Orient Express, Death on the Nile, Murder in Mesopotamia, and Appointment with Death. So these all come out of her experience as she traveled out west to go to, from England all the way out to Mesopotamia. And she traveled on the Orient Express, thus Murder on the Orient Express. So she got a lot of inspiration in her writing and her novels from her archaeology. And it features some archaeology characters in her book. And she writes her memoirs in her book called Come, Tell Me How You Live, 1946. When she published that, she describes life on excavations. It was a very happy way to live, is what she said. She wrote as an archaeologist. Now, she was born in September 15th, 1890. I was also born in September, so she's a September girl, and she was born in Devon in 1890. She married Archibald Christie on December the 24th, 1914. He was actually on leave during World War I, and they got married. She actually had one child, a daughter, Rosalind, and then she died January the 12th, 1976. and we know her as a renowned mystery writer, but she was also an archaeology, and I would not even say enthusiast. I would say she was, even though she wasn't formally trained as an archaeologist, she was certainly well experienced as an archaeologist. She became the best-selling author of all times, which is kind of an interesting title, and she made lots of contributions in archaeology with her husband, Max Mallowan, her second husband. Youngest of 3 children, there were her parents, Frederick and Clarissa Miller. Actually, I have a relative married a Miller down in Nova Scotia. Maybe we're related, who knows? Wealthy upper class upbringing, and so she had a privileged lifestyle, excellent education with a knack for problem solving, which shows up in her novels, that she always tried to solve these great mysteries. Mallowan spoke of her second husband. This capacity appears in her books, that is the knack of problem solving, and in the neat solution of the most complex tangles. That's how he described her. In 1907 and 1908, she had made a trip to Egypt and stayed at the Gezira Palace Hotel in Cairo, and she visited the Great Pyramid of Giza, and this is where she fell in love with archaeology, developed her interest of archaeology and Egyptology, was on this trip. While she was back in Britain, she delved into playwriting and theater, wrote a play, The Blue Beard of Unhappiness, and she was exposed to some biblical archaeologists during this time. So as I said, best-known mystery author. Now, what's kind of interesting is that in December the 3rd, 1926, she disappeared. It was kind of a mystery as to what happened. Interesting coming from a mystery writer. Colonel Archibald Christie was suspected of having murdered her because all that showed up was her car, and a few of her personal belongings were scattered around the ground, and she went completely missing. And then she resurfaced 11 days later. Now, what was going on for this entire time was Archibald Christie was cheating on her with a Nancy Neely, and she wanted a divorce, and he wouldn't give it to her. And so the story goes that she set up this elaborate murder scene, tried to blame him. Lo and behold, after she returned, they got together for a little while. It still didn't work out, but he finally gave her a divorce. You got to remember that at this time they're Anglican, so they're living in England, and that was against the church rules. And so he abandoned all claims to future royalties and demanded a divorce in 1928, and they divorced. But then on October of 1929, she boards the Orient Express and she heads west toward the Middle East. This is a picture of the Orient Express. It goes to Budapest, and this Middle Eastern trip was going to influence her life and her writings from then on. So she shows up on the Orient Express to Iraq, 1925 and 1926. She'd heard about this guy, Sir Leonard Woolley, doing some digging out there, and she thought she'd go and visit on the Orient Express, and he dug from 1925, 26, 28, and 29. She showed up in 1929, and Max Mallowan, he's working here with Sir Leonard Woolley, and this is Woolley's wife, Catherine. This is the picture of the dig house in 1928. Agatha Christie hadn't arrived yet, and that's why she's not in the photograph. And then you see a bunch of the folks that, the locals that were helping with the digging and heading up the cruise. And then her marriage to Max Mallowan. She met Max in November of 1928, visiting Leonard Woolley's excavation there at her. She married him in September of 1930. And it's interesting that Max Mallowan never strayed from his wife. I wonder why. She'd already set up her previous husband for a divorce and strayed from, so I thought that was kind of humorous. Her archaeological contributions, she accompanied Mallowan to other sites, Nineveh, Nimrud, and Shigar Bazaar. She did photography. She cleaned a lot of the artifacts after they were discovered, and she restored some of the artifacts. She helped fund some of the expeditions and built facilities. Max built a writing room for her at Nimrud, and also where she was going to do some photography. This is Sir Leonard Woolley standing here over them.
Hey, David, let me ask you a question. When you're at the dig, do you wear a suit and tie?
Not normally. I don't think I've never taken a tie with me. I had a hat,
Okay.
but I always wear a hat. But I didn't wear a suit and tie. Typical British. On the knickers here too. You got to have those short knickers and the long socks, and very typical of the time period. So yeah, they They dug in style. However, that is a quote from my wife. I bought a Tilly hat for her, and she had a ribbon that she would put in at different colors, and she said, "You got to dig in style."
Very good.
They dug in style. So there's expanded a little bit, and there's a picture of Woolley, a little clearer picture of him. Max Mellowan was Woolley's archaeological assistant at Ur at the time, and also dug at Nineveh in 1931, 1932. But this was at Ur. He worked at Ur for 6 years, 1925 to 1931, and then married Agatha in 1930, but then left Ur. Now there's talk about some disagreements between Max's wife, Agatha, and Sir Leonard Woolley's wife, Catherine. She supposedly converted to Roman Catholicism from being an Anglican because Max was a Catholic. Some have denied that. She is buried in an Anglican cemetery, which would indicate that she may not be. But Reginald Campbell Thompson was heading the excavations at Nineveh, and Max and Reginald were good friends. And so he decided he was going to leave Ur, where Woolley was, and was going to go to Nineveh. And it inspired her novel, The Adventures of the Egyptian Tomb. And here is Reginald's wife, Barbara. Catherine is not in the picture, but there's Agatha and Max. There's only room for one woman at Ur, and so they had some kind of dispute, and so that's why he left. As Agatha said, it was endlessly interesting. Although it was so old, it was new. That was how she saw it. Still speaking here of Ur, this is Sir Leonard Woolley right here. This is Max Mallowan and Agatha Christie. T.E. Lawrence of Arabia, because he was there working at the same time. Now he's there as a spy. He's spying on the Turkish during the war. And so he's there undercover as an archaeologist. So we've got a little espionage. We've got a little bit of romance. All the good makings for a good novel. And this is where Agatha Christie was doing got a lot of her inspiration, did a lot of her writing. This is the Golden Bull harp. We'll a close up of the harp, the front of it here on the right. We'll take a look at that, the lyre with the bullhead of Puabi. So where are we talking? We're talking about discoveries here at Ur. It was identified by Henry Rawlinson, but the major excavations were done by Woolley. And then and many of the artifacts are preserved in the British Museum, as well as the University of Pennsylvania, because he is being sponsored by them as well. And a lot of interesting artifacts we'll look at. Here's a picture of the discovery in 1929, when he discovered the bull harp, or the lyre. And you'll notice the date, 1929. So Max Mallowan and Agatha Christie were there at that time when he discovered this. So they get to see this, probably standing not too far away as he pulls this out of the ground, out of the tomb. This is the restoration of it. Beautiful, a beautiful harp. And there was a beautiful panel here in the front of it. Now this is restored. So the wooden part of it here that had deteriorated has been restored, but the gold, lapis lazuli, and the ivories were all restored. Now I have a copy of a piece of it here. This is a little jewelry box that I picked up at the British Museum. It's not original, but you can see the ivory there and the image on the front of one of these plates. Just a beautiful piece. And it was it's called Tel Makayar, the mound of Pit. It was burned by the Elamites in 2004 BC, not AD. BC, and Abraham was born in 1952 to 2000 BC roughly. So it would have dated, part of it would have dated to the time period of Abraham. And so even though there wasn't any direct connection to Abraham at this location, Sir Leonard Woolley connected it to Abraham in his name to raise some funds, so you get some money coming out of it. But what it does show us is that it was well developed and cultured city. I got a couple pictures of this. So here's the Royal Cemetery of Ur. This is 1918 photograph. Here's some of the sewer systems that they had put in place, terracotta. And this is Sir Leonard Woolley and his wife, Catherine, photograph of them. This is what the royal tombs looked like, a recreation drawing of it as they discovered them, all of the soldiers and the servants.
That's kind of cool. They don't have spoke wheels like you see Egyptian chariots.
That's right. That's right. These ones have the solid wheels, which is kind of interesting. We're gonna show another photo of that in a few minutes. And but this is a colorized drawing of it. I colorized. It was black and white drawing originally. It was the Queen's retinue and the oxen drivers. Here's a picture of the royal tomb of Ur, the oxen and the chariot and the servants, because when the king died, the servants died as well and followed him into the afterlife. I'm not sure if it was a good thing or a bad thing to work for the king. it would certainly give you some incentive to keep him healthy.
No doubt. That's one way not to poison your king.
There you go, because he goes, you go.
Yeah.
There was two of these found, the ram caught in a thicket, and there's the what it looked like originally. There's a pair of them, one's in the British Museum, and then the other one is in the Pittsburgh Museum. And it reminded Woolley of Abraham, lifted up his eyes and looked in there and saw the ram caught in a thicket. And so that's where it gets its title from. But this is actually not a ram, it's a goat. But it was common scene. I even saw them, goats with their up on their hind legs, up in the tree, eating the leaves off the acacia trees, or a common view when I was working there. And then they have these beautiful, they're kind of like bookends, two of them, all made of gold, lapis lazuli, which is this blue, and carnelian, and then the ivory.
They'd be cuneiform tablet ends.
Yeah, that's right. Tablet ends. The Royal Standard was discovered as well. We're not sure exactly what this box was, what its purpose was, and I'm not even sure of any speculation on it. It just had these beautiful panels on the front and the back, and one was the war scene and the other was a peace scene. This is the war side here. You can see the chariots, and there's one up here, but I want to point this one out. This is kind of interesting. It's a close-up of the chariot. You see the lapis lazuli, the blue here, the carnelian, the red, all down here. And there's an axe here on this panel. But George, I think you've got a sample of this, do you not?
Yeah, we got,
the
yesterday I
museum.
was able to pick up a sample in terracotta from the Museum of Archaeology and Biblical History. David, when we get done with your display of your PowerPoint, then, because right now it'd be teeny tiny if I showed it.
True. Okay, good idea. I can show this picture again later as well. But again, you notice these wheels, they're not spoked. These are solid wheels, and that's kind of interesting. And here's the...
Whoever pulling those chariots, are those horses?
Oh, that's another question. I had a little bit of information on that. The chariot is drawn by 4 equods, but the equods are not connected to the reins, which is kind of interesting here. The reins are connected to the individual behind the chariot.
Yes.
There's no bits as well on the horses, because bits were introduced about 1,000 years later. These animals were probably onagers or asses. Horses came to Mesopotamia from Central Asia during the 2nd millennium BC. So the depiction and the mosaics were made using lapis lazuli and limestone, red limestone, and shells put in place with bitumen, which is like a petroleum-based tar. And it was a hollow box, and it's, as I said, the precise purpose is really unknown. Was it a drum? Was it used for sound? Was it used to store something? Didn't seem to have a lid, but beautifully done. So interesting that this, we're not sure exactly, well, these are donkeys or...
That's interesting. That it doesn't have a rein. The guy's holding to the cord, but yeah. Oh, that's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, so kind of interesting to look at this close up. The copper alloy axe is kind of interesting here. The restored handle, discovered in one of the tombs. Then we have some of these Sumerian statues. I believe you have some to show later.
Yes.
Believed to be self-portraits, not of me, but of Sumerian. They were presented in the temples as votive gifts to honor the gods, and represents their donors. And here they're holding something. The one here on the left is a photo I took of one that's in the Oriental Institute Museum of Chicago, and the other one's probably from the Met Museum, I think. Here's another photo of it. There's the peace side, a caravan depicting travelers right here as well, like we saw in the Beni Hassan mural, similar to that.
Yes.
They're animals.
So people notice the Beni Hassan from,
Egypt.
Anyway, Beni Hassan mural from Middle Kingdom, Egypt. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So, but what I wanted to point out on the piece one here is right on this panel right here in the corner on the right is a picture of that bull harp. See it right there?
Wow, you're right.
So it's the bull harp being played by someone. So we actually get to see the artifact.
You'd think that'd be heavy.
Yeah. Well, wood, a little bit of gold, but it's gold flake, gold plated. Another artifact that you can see here as well is this here.
It's like he's playing a piano.
It's a Mac.
Just kidding. Nice.
Don't believe everything you see on the internet, folks. Somebody put this together and I thought, really interesting. AI these days, who knows what you'd find, but That picture's not real. So have your wits about you, folks. Put your thinking
Yeah.
caps on, people.
Yeah, Macintosh.
He's got a Mac, yeah. All right, here's some of the artifacts that were discovered. This is not AI. These are gold artifacts from the Puabi's death pit. And just taking a look through the dagger, and these are all in the British Museum. Some beautiful, beautiful leaf jewelry and earrings. The gold cup. Actually, this is a beer mug. Now this here is not just a handle, that's a straw.
Wow.
That's for sipping the beer. That's how you get
That's
the
a good idea even for today.
below the, that's how you get below the, you see it's just a little bit below the top. See how it's higher? So you're not going to lose your beer, but you don't get the froth off the top. You get the good stuff down the bottom. I thought that was ingenious.
It
That's
is.
clever. Yeah. There's a helmet. This helmet is considered to be ceremonial, not worn into battle because it's made out of gold, out of one sheet or one piece of gold. And then these beautiful leaf necklaces. And then there's another beaded necklace here. Anyway, just some beautiful, beautiful stuff. To see this stuff in person at the British Museum is it's just awe-inspiring. Really, really is. And then to see the bull's head up close as soon as she arrived. Here's my map. Looking for my map. So there's there's Nineveh, Nimrod, and there's Tel Barak in Syria. It's Nagar. And right above it is Shagar Bazar.
Now, do they get to all these locations by train? I know you probably don't know the answers, but
Um,
is
well,
this by train? Is this by some kind of caravan?
she traveled by the Orient Express by train to Istanbul here, and then they traveled by train all the way down to, well, it's down here in Baghdad. I don't have it on the map.
That's
Where
okay. That's you answered the question. In other words, they had a train that could go all that way.
Yeah,
That's
and then
amazing.
back up here. And then they would travel out by horse, and sometimes by car. They would have motorized cars at that time, but most of it was on horse and donkey, carrying their supplies. So that's our tour of Ur. So in 1929, Max Mallowan. Now, whether Max had a falling out with Sir Leonard Woolley or whether it was just their wives, he decides to go work with to Nineveh in Iraq with Reginald Thompson. So
Yeah.
off he goes, 1930. Here is one of the pits that he dug. Took him 11 weeks,
Nice.
25 meters down. There's a
That
story
looks
of
dangerous.
my best friend, Dr. Scott Stripling, one season did a pit looking for, we call it, I have a chapter in my memoirs. I call it the square to nowhere. He puts a square in, he dug down thinking that he's going to find the cistern. But anyway, there wasn't anything in it. But this one had stuff in it. And you see how they've got a staircase all up the side where that's how they would get the dirt out of it. There's a piece of pottery they discovered. They dug together at Nineveh, 1931, 1932, and then a place called El Arpachia in Iraq, 1933, they dug there. Now that's very close to Nineveh, sort of like on the outskirts. And then they went to Syria to Shagar Bazar, 1935, 1937. And then in Syria to Tel Barak, 1937, 1938. And then Nimrod, 1949. And then he became the director for the British Museum, a field director. And then also he worked as the British School of Archaeology in Iraq, 1932. He was the first to excavate the Balaka Valley sites up in Syria. So Agatha's duties: cleaning, repairing objects, matching pottery fragments, photographing, cataloging the finds. This is Agatha right here down in the dirt. She's still got her dress on. And she's
Right?
got her stick that she carried with her.
Yeah, if
And
you're going to go excavate, you need a three-piece suit or a dress. Yeah.
Yep, that's right. You get pretty dirty at the end of the day. And then she complained one day, "Oh, I'm not an archaeologist. I don't know that much. I was never formally trained." And he says, "Don't you realize," Max said, "that at this moment, you know more about prehistoric pottery than any woman in England?" Yeah, that was true. So even though she didn't have formal education, she had field education. That's a lot like many. You get your training out in the field.
Right.
Here's her examining some of the photographs with her husband Max. Smoked a pipe back then. My grandfather smoked a pipe with my uncle. My dad never did. So she had a passion for photography. So she trained at Reinhardt School of Commercial Photography back in England. Then she developed the techniques for artifact photography. In other words, you have to have the exact perspective. Now, we have another whole podcast on photography and archaeology where I mentioned this a little bit. We talked with Dan Galassini, who was our photographer at our set at Tel El Hammam. So if you want to know more, I'd suggest encourage you to go over and have a view with that. He explains all the photography stuff a little more detail, but Agatha Christie was really a pioneer in this whole field of photography. The challenges, as I said, was very hot, and that was a very cramped, dark room. She started at 6 a.m. to avoid the heat. That's why we started at 6 a.m. at our dig at Shiloh, because of the heat. And we would knock off probably around 2 o'clock. But you can imagine being in a cramped, dark room. And so she provided precise artifact photographs for Max, restored the ceramics, recorded the finds. So she played an integral role. And Christie describes her time in the dark room. She says, in it, one can neither sit nor stand. Can you imagine? Crawling in on all fours, I developed plates, kneeling with bent head. I came out practically asphyxiated with heat and unable to stand upright. And you can imagine back in those days, the chemicals you had to deal with, probably carcinogenic or something as well. So she describes what it was like. So it was no picnic, but she did it out of love for her husband and for the field of archaeology. Here the two of them are, what they looked like when they were a little bit younger. I have colorized them. Agatha Christie was 14 years older than Max, so she was quite a bit older than the young man and he fell in love with her. This is Oxford, New College, what it looked like back in the 1900s. This is where Max got his education. He was born in 1904. He had Austrian heritage and background. His father was Austrian. And he went to Lancing College first, and then he went to New College at Oxford. I taught at Oxford, but at Regent Park College, even though our dining halls looked very similar. And then he apprenticed with Leonard Woolley at Ur in 1925 onward. And so we go to Iraq in 1933, and here he is with Agatha. And this was new, a new site, a new dig, and it was without parallel. It was key for understanding Mesopotamian archaeology, so it was really quite important. 180 different workers.
That's unreal.
Now,
Who financed that? Oh my God.
I've worked with about 100 and we've had over 100, maybe 120 at Shiloh. That was one of the largest excavations in Israel at the time. This year, I think they have around 100 that are going. In fact, they're having problems getting their flights. A lot of the folks that are traveling over there right now as I'm speaking are having their flights canceled and trying to get flights through Dubai and through Paris, and they're canceling flights left, right, and center. Here's some pottery, painted pottery, restored by Agatha, discovered at Tel Arpachia. Shigar Bazaar, 1935 to 37. So they rented a mud brick building in Amuda, but it was mouse infested. They hired a highly professional cat to solve the issue. The Expedition House. And there was a whole lot of cats where we stayed at the Movenpick because they were the ones that kept the mice under control. And that's what they did here. This is a picture of their house right here, mud brick, with 10,000 mud bricks. They include the bedroom, drawing room, storeroom, and dark room. So here's a colorized picture of it, the dig house. And this was the room on the end that he built for her to do her writing. There's Agatha with her stick. This is the payday, where they would do all the recording of the bakshish. That's their money. And there's Max bent over there, making sure that everything gets recorded correctly. A couple of finds, objects from there. In Tel Barak, 1937 to 38. This photograph was taken by Agatha Christie, but I colorized it. As I said, all about her photography, recording, and everything. And the war interrupted the archaeological activities for a decade. And then he went to be an RAF in North Africa. There's a close-up of it. So this became quite an important site. There's what it looks like today, the palace, and there's some of the crew. That's the household staff, did the cooking and stuff. Here's raising a basket. This is how they rigged it up. We actually used a motorized one like this. Not me, but actually another archaeologist that was working up the road up behind the dam at a Roman site, and they had a motorized one of these. If I can find the photograph, I'll pop it up for everyone. But this was underground room of the Eye Temple, and it was called the Eye Temple because a lot of these artifacts were found. They look like they had eyes, these alabaster eye idols. A cuneiform tablet was discovered there, and they found thousands of these, so it was quite interesting to get this kind of an eye idol. A few more artifacts, alabaster head, stone frog, another one of these eye idols. And then they go finally to Nimrod, 1949 to 1957. There's the dig house, some tents they were sleeping in. And they discovered the Citadel, the Northwest Palace, the Governor's Palace, the Burnt Palace, Nebu's Temple, Nernete's Temple, the Ziggurat, and what's become known as Fort Shalmaneser. And of course, here's some of the famous ivories. The ivory of the lioness devouring a boy. This is at the British Museum. Another lion panel, ivory panel. It's beautiful artwork, absolutely gorgeous. And then there's an ivory head of a lion, and then some furniture, ivory furniture. Agatha, she died possibly of with Alzheimer's or dementia. She declined in health from 71 to 74. Her last novel was Posthumous of Fate, 1973, and she died in 1976. She was named Dame of the British Empire. That's equivalent to Lord for a man. This is for a woman, although she preferred her title of Lady Malowan. And we know her, of course, as Agatha Christie from her husband, Christie. And she was certainly a prolific author with a lot of popularity, but a lot of the inspiration for her writings came out of her role with her husband from archaeology. And they're buried here at this church in England. She died in January 12th, 1975, and then he died in 1978 in Greenway House in Devon. And they were buried together here at this particular church. So that's my overview of Agatha Christie, Max Mallowan. Don't forget T.E. Lawrence. I have a whole chapter in my book on him. Fascinating what he was doing over there at that time. Anyway, George, you had a few artifacts that you wanted to share.
Let's look at some artifacts for everybody. I think when we're looking at the standard, it's called the Standard of Ur, which was made out of the lapis lazuli and shell. And then what was the red again? It was cornelian, I think.
Carnelian, yeah, it's a
Okay,
red
then,
carnelian.
I'm gonna have to turn around. So first, let's look at that the chariot. How about that?
Yeah, I'll put the chariot up.
Is that good? Chariot, a cart, a chariot.
Yeah, I think so.
And let me see if I can focus this down a little bit, like this.
Now, folks, this is not a replica. This is a real artifact from the museum.
Yeah, you can see the part of it.
See
now, of course, it might there. So
wheels. Got a little bit of oh, it's got some beautiful little look like olive branches or.
Well, remember that cord that that individual was hanging on, but didn't go to the horse. It wasn't a harness. They were hanging on for the rear end. Remember that?
Yes.
That's what that's supposed to be. Or you could say it's just a child's play toy and push it along.
Pull it along, yeah.
Yeah, so here it looks like, now this is original terracotta, but it looks like maybe there's a place there for them to stand. Maybe you could stand here and then they'd have something else, storage in the back. I don't know, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it looks like it's perhaps a reproduction.
I'm sorry, let me hold it up for people.
Reproduction for a child as a toy.
As a toy for a child, more than likely, yeah.
Yeah, more than likely, but it's a good reproduction of what they looked like during that time period.
Isn't it? I think it's, I'm sorry,
amazing.
Let me get back on the camera like that. Now, of course, we put this back together, but look at the wheels. They're not spoked.
That's right. They're solid. Yeah, good.
Yeah, they're solid.
Yeah, beautiful.
And there's a hole right here. I don't know what. It's plugged up, and I never tried to attempt to clean it out. But there's a hole that goes perforated all the way through. I wonder if that's why we didn't see that cord going forward, because maybe what was to the horses was actually went through the bottom.
Well, that would be where the wood would go for the, to connect to the,
Hold the horses together.
yeah, it's like a wooden T.
So the horses might be attached to the wood pole, and that's what's pulling it.
Yeah, a yoke.
Well, we're doing the best we can. We're not, what do they call them? Equestrians? But we think that this is actually from that time period. This is, from when they were doing the standard of Ur. And it probably was a child's play toy. Then we just assume. A child's play toy or number two, a votive item.
Yeah, that's another option, or both.
Or both, yeah. Okay, let me put that. Next, you showed us the statue.
And the votive, yes.
Okay, there we go. Go back further so people can see it.
Beautiful. Another actual object, not a reproduction. This is the real deal. Yeah.
Now notice the inserts in the eyes are gone. Those were like painted shell.
Yeah.
And they were like, eyes are wide open, like they're at awe in the front of their deity.
Right.
And he might have had some kind of votive item that has since been broken away.
Right.
I guess he also had nipple piercing going on there. I don't know what that's about.
Yeah, they would put shells.
But if you look at it very carefully, if I had a beard like you, we would kind of look alike. What do you think? Kind of.
Yeah, I can.
Look at it. It kind of looks like he's from Hawaii.
Oh, they have the.
You ever see those things in the front of a car that used to wobble back and forth like this?
Oh, right, those Hawaiian dancers.
Hawaiian dancer.
I could get one for my car. I'll have a Sumerian dancer on my car. Great.
That'd be a hard one to explain.
Now, next week, folks, make sure you check in with us again, because we've got some really interesting artifacts from the museum, as well as an interesting topic. What are you going to deal with next week, George? George, you're going to talk about somebody.
With Trudy and her husband Moshe Dothan, and they were Israeli archaeologists, a husband and wife team. Somebody like Trudy and her husband would be kind of like on the forefront, and of course they have since passed away. Her husband in, I believe, 1999, and then Trudy passed away in 2016. Now I got some stories to tell also. You just have fun stories to tell when you accidentally bump into people. Because when I was over in Israel, she passed away in 2016, and I met her around 2003 accidentally. I bumped into her, but there's a real cool story behind it.
You're gonna tell it next week?
Yes, next week. And then I'm not going to do it now. We're out of time. But also we got lots of artifacts from the Museum of Archaeology and Biblical History, Philistine, and also artifacts representing the Mycenaean culture, because we think the Philistines possibly migrated from the Aegean region, the ancient Greek region. Go ahead.
Well, George, as a teaser, just show one of them, but don't say what it is. And just for next week, don't say what it is, but just
okay, this is very, very rare.
So we're going to talk about that. We'll talk about that next week. And so stay tuned. Log in next week, and we'll talk all about it and how it relates to Judy and Moshe Dothan.
Absolutely. So we got plenty of artifacts, and we're going to have a lot of fun next week, as we try to do every week with everybody. We try to share artifacts from the museum vault, and it's something we like to do that is unique to our program, the Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down. David, thank you for your PowerPoint. That was intense. That gave us for those that didn't know that this author, Agatha Christie, was also an archaeologist. Now you know. So that's a kind of an interesting part of history that people are not aware of. So with that, let's sign out. David, you want to tell everybody goodbye today?
Yeah, I will. Yeah. So you can have romance in archaeology, and Agatha Christie and Max Mallowan is an example of it. So thanks everyone for joining us. Stay tuned. next week for more on these famous archaeology couples. And until next time, we'll see you later.
Okay, we'll see everybody. Remember to like and subscribe because that helps the algorithm. Like, subscribe, and we'll see everybody next week. Thank you very much.